What's up, everyone? I'm going to just do this in one take. I like to do things in one take when I don't have time or energy to do anything ever. So, I'm going to just tell you really quick what this episode is about and kind of what goes down here. Basically, I did a call where I called up a couple of friends, in this case, Mikey, Michael Downs of the Dangerous Maybe, and Andrew, our friend Andrew in the Navy of Master of Signified Bodies, and also the other half of Chevoy, which is a new podcast. They're reading through Lacan's seminars. But anyway, it's Andrew. It's Andrew. Andrew's awesome. We love Andrew. Anyway, look, so I bring them on for a call. Bryan joins in the call later, but basically I'm giving the update about some big things that have happened and talking about why a lot of things aren't going to happen like I was hoping or planning, and how there's other things in the works. And then we talk theory and stuff like that. Also, everyone else shares what they're up to. And so I think that if you listen to this, you'll probably feel inspired to do stuff. And so if you're feeling stuck right now, then this is going to be good for you. So just like kick back, play some video games, go for a walk, go for a hike, go for a bike ride, drive to work, sit in traffic, listen to this, maybe cue it up for later. And hey, if you're actually at work, at a job where you get to have earbuds, then fucking awesome. You get to listen to this while getting paid. That's great. That's all I do. So anyway, I hope everyone will get a lot out of this. I think it's going to be good. Also, though, the news. Whew, oh boy. Yep, here you go.
All right, we're back on.
So, okay, Dave,
All
you
right.
want to do the update?
So, what I'm calling you out of your work session right now. Is that right?
Yeah, you're being a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Well, you've been really. I wanted to do a quick update for the channel and for you guys, and just talk for like a couple of minutes. And I
Yeah.
figured I'd call, and if anybody else hops into this call, then cool. But if not, it's just us. I think it's good. I think it's recording now. It wasn't before, but it did. It randomly stopped. So if we lose it, we lose it. But let's just go with this. So the studio is not happening. You both know this now. No one else really knows that yet. I haven't talked about it publicly, but yeah. So as far as like the little update goes, it's like nothing I had planned for this year is going to go the way that I planned. But at the same time, it's going to be epic. And so it's really sad because like the place where I live, the family, they're dealing with a personal tragedy, and it's just not a good time to be there right now. And so I've been just staying in town and am going to be well, Anne was going to move to the farm with me when her lease is up at the end of this month. And so now that we're not doing that, all of our stuff's going in a storage unit, and we're going to camp for a month and a half. And I'm going to be basically off of the grid.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, I'm going to be camping that whole time, except that I'll be driving in for work 3 nights a week at Amazon.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to rough it just to experience it without our backpacks and stuff. It's going to be kind of weird driving into the city for like an hour drive just to go to work,
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be an experience. It's going to be cool. And then after that, we're going abroad, and we're going to do some really cool creative work with our friends who just got a place in Finland.
Oh, fuck
And
yeah.
I hopefully get to meet up with a couple of people in Europe and do some cool stuff while I'm there. But the main reason I was well, I kind of wanted to just say that that's what's going on, and because that's going on, all the other plans that I had further down the road are being moved up, but most of that's going to be writing. So I want to do some video stuff. I don't know what I'll end up getting done, so I'm not going to make any promises at all. Like Mikey and I want to do something to wrap up and do something big with the series we've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
But
The Lacan one? Or the Žižek one?
do you want to answer that one, Michael?
Yeah, it's actually I'm trying to do a quilting point where it like is a crossover where it it makes it like turns them all into one series. So it's going to
Oh,
be
nice.
Lacan and Žižek,
Fuck
and
yeah.
so and here's the thing. I mean, of course, down the road, there's going to be more of these videos in some, in some form that we'll do together. But it's just as for now, with what Dave's dealing with, there's going to be a kind of hiatus. And I was telling Dave Dave's living situations ever since I've known Dave, like it's just the rug getting pulled out from under him every time. Like, and yet Dave always survives the shit. I told him he should change the name from Theory Plebe to Theory Cockroach because
Yeah. Fucking theory nomad, more like.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But yeah, and so we're gonna plan on doing one more in the series before the hiatus occurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We still need to get you guys onto the Kev Void channel. We want to talk to all like have all of us on there.
Yeah.
What is that?
That's the new name of our channel. Nick and I, we changed it from Pints with Lacan to Kevoy, but but instead of it spelling like CHE like the Italian, it's like K like in Spanish because I'm Mexican and he's Italian.
Oh,
Oh,
that's good. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and it happened because of like a accidental mistake because I spelled it like Spanish and he's like it's actually spelled this way. He's like sorry for my meticulous Italian correction because he's an Italian teacher, so makes sense. But
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Quick background for the people who frequent the channel or are new subscribers, but might have missed the one time I think you were on the channel there, Andrew. So, this is Andrew, Master Signified Bodies, Instagram meme star, extraordinaire, and
Meme master.
meme master. Yep. And he was doing a series on just reading through the Lacan seminars, and we were talking, and we brought him on the channel, and we all talked once. But we talked behind the scenes a lot, and I've plugged your channel. I've shared a couple of your videos, at least one, and
Yeah.
I aim to plug it more, but I just So anyway, people, it's a thing, and this is Andrew. So
Yeah.
that's
And behind the scenes we have Nick somewhere out there, but yeah, you can't have
yeah.
Andrew without Nick. We're the dynamic duo.
Oh, and people would have seen you in Young Zhijikians.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I've been on the channel twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the update part, and the two of you, I like. What are you both up to with your projects right now? Where are you at with your projects? What's your update?
Go ahead.
So,
You're up first, Andrew.
yeah. So right now I'm just compiling some ideas so I can start my first Medium article, and
What?
Fantastic.
I'm debating on like what I want to start off of with, but it's going to be psychoanalytically oriented, and I think I'm going to start it off with the difference between psychoanalysis and analytic psychology with Jung, and kind of emphasize the crucial split between Freud and Jung on the theory of libido, but also like show how Lacan is the one that kind of situates psychoanalysis and libido as being sexual, and pretty much bringing that orientation back to psychoanalysis and away from this like universal psychic libido pantheism, or like this like libido towards a transformation of like one's inner potential or true self. So that's what I think I'm going to start doing it on. Like, not I think I am. I just got to like see how I'm going to start it off and compile my notes, especially since like Nick and I are pretty much like knee deep into seminar one and seeing like from the narcissism chapter how Lacan orients that. It's kind of been a little help like to give me some more clarity on like where to work through.
Well,
But
I can tell you this: like, if you want a long-term goal, everyone knows there's this huge rift between Lacanians and Jungians.
yeah.
No one's written that book though, and like somebody who knows both of them well needs to actually write a book that explains like here's where the huge disagreements actually occur. Like why is there such a incompatibility between them, and to show what, like, because this is something none of them are going to do. What points are compatible?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just saying. I don't know of any, and maybe there is in a foreign language. Maybe there's a book in France or a book in Germany that hasn't been translated. But as far as I know, in the English-speaking world, we don't have a good single volume that really goes into detail over the big antagonism between Jung and Lacan.
Yeah, and it's like with Lacanians, they know Jungians and they don't like them, but it seems like with Jungians, they have no idea really who Lacan is or
Mhm.
the Lacanian world. It's like pretty much all just like Freudians, Kleinians, Adlerians, or whatever you want to call it. Then you got like Rogerians, but that's it. Like it's just psychoanalysis was just like something in the past. Now like we're like doing our own thing with depth psychology and personal transformation and person-centered psychology, which is like pretty much stuck in that dyad of two-body psychology, which like Lacan talks about. You have to account for the third, speech and the symbolic, which is another thing that he mentions too, which I need to emphasize, is the fact that Jung confuses the imaginary with the symbolic. These archetypes or imagos are images, these complexes that
Exactly. Yes.
are caught in this imaginary resistance relationship of aggressivity and frustration, but it never accounts for drives, the symbolic, and quite frankly, the real.
There you go. I mean, what
Yeah.
the idea that, I mean, and let's be very precise. The real is the hiccup of the symbolic. It's the
Yeah.
not the twisting, the contradiction. Of So in seminar 20, that's where Lacan gives. I should send it to you. I mean, I'm not going to have it verbatim here, but it's where he gives the definition of the real as like a deadlock in formalization.
Yeah.
And the idea is that the symbolic structure itself, like any system of meaning, has inherent contradictions built into it, which means that it's never completely whole, because there's these points where it gets twisted and knotted within itself, and that point is the real. And that's what traditional ontology. That's why Lacan wasn't an ontologist and always wanted to insist upon whatever he was doing wasn't traditional ontology. And it's because the traditional concept of being always involves presenting like a harmonious image of reality. Like, here's what reality is. And it never takes the real, which is then this is why Lacan and Hegel are so compatible.
Exactly.
Like, that's what Hegel was doing, is showing how reality is always contradictory. A does not equal A equals A and not A, right? It's this whole thing. So
yeah, and that's something that Jung doesn't have, is like this harmonious, this like sublation of contradiction. Rather, there's always like a point where you can achieve harmony and then equanimity, polarity, like fixed polarities. Like you have the fixed anima image of the woman, and then the fixed animus of the logos of the man.
that's another thing, right? Like,
yeah.
for Jung, there's a sexual relation, and for Lacan, there is no sexual relation. And I mean, look, I'm reading Zupancic's What is Sex, and it's one of the greatest books of Lacanian theory I've ever read, and she really explains this better than anybody I've come across. But I mean, look, the average person listening is not going to know what any of that means. But
True.
I mean, and that would take, I mean, it would take a whole discussion to flesh it out. But point is, Jung basically thinks there's a harmonious relationship that's possible, and Lacan doesn't think that's possible. And the only way to make up for it not being possible is through love. This is for Lacan.
Yeah.
But again, to circle back around to the main point is, somebody needs to write the book like Lacan and Jung or whatever. And so I think you don't know it, but you're kind of laying the groundwork to be able to do that one day.
Yeah.
Your first
I
post.
told him that basically, like, I think the best thing to do is to just like study your blog and go, okay, So to write a book like that, and there's other books up his sleeve as well. But to write these kinds of books, he just needs to basically spend a significant period of time fleshing out these concepts, between these two thinkers and other thinkers, but doing it in that sort of like rigorous and methodical, and like taking the time necessary to actually unpack it, and not just a primary text and not just a secondary text, but like a bunch of secondary texts and the primary text repeatedly until it's like fleshed out. But it's a work in progress. You got a lot of time to be developing this, so it's I don't know, like if I had the time and energy that I wanted, like at my disposal here, I would want to do a lot of this line by line analysis stuff that Michael does. I would want to do. Every concept that I use the most should have its own post. Is like, it really should. And I'm just not there yet because it's like that's the thing. Michael's been working this whole time, and he gets off work and then he goes and he writes for 3 to 4 hours.
Fuck yeah.
So it's like, that's amazing. That drive is like really inspiring. So
that's where it's weird. Like, I got to give more credit to my death drive or my jouissance, because somehow my libidinal economy got hooked on philosophy and doing it in this very kind of routine, repetitive way that I do every day. And I mean, for me, it's kind of like my symptom at this point. But no, I mean, and I look, my standard has always been and continues to be like, I have to be able to make the shit clearer than anybody I've read, and I have to connect dots that they don't connect. So many Lacanian, like we were just talking about
I would just
drive,
right? I know where you're going with this, and I just want to say, connecting dots, not just between the black boxes of the jargon discourse,
to the world,
or to the outside, like other thinkers or whatever. No, yeah, to the world, and you do it to pop culture as well. But you will constantly relate it to things in the world that you deal with.
Basically, for me to understand an idea, I have to be able to live with it. And what I mean, like, I have to see it at work. I have to see it at the coffee shop. I have to see it at the grocery store. I have to see it in traffic. And if I don't see it operating in my life world, that talk like Husserl, then I mean, what do I care about it? Like,
yeah. And one of the things I definitely see, I'm eye to eye with you on that, because that's how I am. Especially like one of the two concepts that I think that I'm starting to realize in my day-to-day world is like, ideology according to Žižek, and cynicism, and how people like enjoy their symptom as ideology, and will disavow it with cynical like pessimistic mindsets, pretty much. Especially in the Navy, I see that shit all the time.
No, I mean, one of the things, and I've emphasized this a couple times, I think, in the last videos we've had, but for me, like, one of the things I keep dealing with at my job is that whenever politics get brought up or anything, like, signifiers matter. And this goes back to the Chris Catrone thing and all. I mean, basically, like, if I start talking about capitalism and I use certain words, like, the conversation just comes to a screeching halt and everybody disagrees. But if I talk about it with different words, so the other day we were talking about how, I mean, they're like, we're all prostitutes, like, we all whore ourselves to a capitalist. And I'm sitting there going, right, they have no problem saying that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and then one of them goes, oh, we're worse than the average prostitute. The average prostitute just sells their body. Like, we have to sell our souls. And so you have a whole group of guys who will say all of that. But then if you start saying, oh, communism, what about social, capitalism is structurally exploit. If you bring in different terms, then they all shut down and they all disagree. And it's so weird how, like, this is Lacan's emphasis on the importance of signifiers themselves, that you can only get people to go for certain things based on how the signifiers you're using.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny where I see this moment, like half the guys are conservatives, half the guys are liberals. I say half. Some of them are conservatives, some are liberals. Most of them are like normies who just don't care about politics
Yeah.
and want the culture war to go away.
Yeah, or
And
they're
yet
like kind of libertarian type, like.
you have all of that. I deal with
Yeah.
all that, but there's these moments of universal consensus that capitalism sucks if you get them to, if you approach it in the right way. And so, like, if we're talking about ideology or politics, this is just another Lacanian point. Like, you gotta use the right signifiers.
And that's kind of funny that you're saying it, is like I was kind of mentioning this with this one of the voice messages I had with Dave, but I was like kind of like the way the PMC acts, but in a sense anti-capitalist sentiment is a part of capitalism now, in which it like gives itself like some kind of self-hate or like kind of like masochistic tendency to
it
like
really
hate
kind of
itself.
mastered that. I like in post 60s, right? Capitalism really was like, oh yeah, we need to turn anti-capitalism into inherent transgression, like it's built in to the capitalist system. So like, yeah, like of course we like Hollywood studios will put out a film like Fight Club, or the music industry will release albums by Rage Against the Machine. I mean, it's the commodification of anti-capitalism itself. And the reason it works, the reason it's ideological, is people think because they consume those products or because they identify with them, that in and of itself is them enacting anti-capitalism.
Yeah,
And it
but the
doesn't do
form is
anything
still
to capital.
capitalism. Yeah.
I want to
So
take I want to take two threads from the conversation, bring them back around to it. So basically, Michael, you were talking about your writing approach, or what you kind of set yourself, the standard you set for yourself. We call it the Mikey standard. That was Bryan's coinage. His goal is the Mikey standard, and I agree. Anyway,
okay, I've never heard that before, but that's funny. Like, okay,
oh yeah, oh it's a thing. But so yeah, what are you working on? Like what are you working on right now?
oh,
Just give
okay,
me an
sorry,
update,
I
guys.
didn't hear Frizza. All right, so I've been working on my main book. Everybody knows that I've been working on it for years. Well, I was writing a section of it, and it turned into its own book. So my first book is basically done. I'm adding in a couple little things. I recently took a course through GCAS, which was taught by Isabel Millar, who wrote a book called The Psychoanalysis of Artificial Intelligence. I love Isabel. I think she's a fucking rock star theorist. I think this is one of the coolest books on artificial intelligence ever written because it's from a Lacanian perspective. And I learned, like, Isabel, like, it's like a lot of the Lacanians I've been talking to, like Mark Murphy, I've been talking to him, and Isabel and Dwayne Roussel. Like, a lot of them are big on Seminar 20 and then like the later seminar. So like Todd's all about those, 11 through 16. So Todd, like whenever I'm talking Lacan with Todd, we're talking basically those seminars. So the later stuff on sexuation and synthome, and like Dwayne's talking about like the concept of the fraternity and all this stuff. Basically, I've learned a lot of the later Lacan recently, and there's aspects of that I want to add into this book before I release it. And so it's done, but it's like it's finished, but it's not finalized yet. And I'm hoping to have the first book done and available on Amazon as soon as Dave and I can make that happen. And so working on getting the first book out, and then like my thing is I'm taking some time. I said I'm working through Alenka Zupancic's What is Sex, and I cannot recommend the book enough. I tried reading it right when it first came out, and it didn't. I didn't know, like, even back then, I didn't know enough. It didn't register. Now, when I read it, like, I feel like I understand 95% of what I'm reading. Like, I'm really getting it. And it's
Nice.
just one of the best single volumes of Lacanian theory. And it's just a masterpiece in theory. And I've just have I never let myself get lost in a text because I'm always trying to write or and I'm like, no, this is so good. Like, this is one of these books. Like, out of all the books of theory I've read, there are certain books I can pinpoint where I'm like, no, this one really changed me forever. Being in Time is one of them. Marxist Capital is one of them. Uh, Critique of Pure Reason, Simulacra and Simulation, Sublime Object of Ideology. What is Sex is actually in that category for me. It's that big. So, yeah, and the good news, though, is unlike a lot of those books, it's pretty short. It's like 140 pages. And
Yeah.
I'm halfway done with it. So, I'll probably be finished with it in a week or so. And then I'm going to get back to finishing the first book, getting that done. And then I've got some blog posts that I haven't posted yet that I want to put up on the blog. And then it's just for however long it takes, it's just getting my main book finished.
And there's several other little books that are kind of being put on the back burner because of that being the priority right now. But there's also that Introduction to Lacan book and Žižek at Work, and that's
Look,
just
Žižek at Work is like, I don't care if, like, we talk about it publicly. Like, it's Žižek at Work is a short essay I wrote. It was published in a Spanish journal. I don't know, like, there's been people who have wanted to publish the English version. I at the time I was like, no, I'm going to do something else with it, or I want to write an expanded version. I'm tempted to just throw the original version up on the blog. It's not not a finished piece. Like, it was, I had to stay in a word limit, which, I'm not used to having to do. So it's very short. I didn't really flesh out what I had in mind, and it needs to be a short book. And so, I don't know. Part of me is like, well, should I just save it and just put out the short book version, or should I release the version I have? Like, it'll probably end up going up on the blog. But
honestly, if you're willing to put it on the blog, you should just let college or something.
I can't hear you. You're like breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay, that's how I was holding my phone, I guess. But the beta edition, like when a video game gets pre-released so that it can be beta trialed on people, it'd just be nice so that you can hand it to Christian so that he'll actually read it. Like,
Yeah.
there's a handful of people who would actually read it. We wouldn't. I'm saying, like, it could be something people can get their hands on, but we're not like, we're not marketing it. It's something someone can get their hands as a pre-edition.
Yeah.
And I think
And
the
then,
same
like,
thing. I think the same thing should happen to that Bourdieu's Forms of Capital. Just instantly, just put it out. And I kind of want to start doing that with a few of the things that we know are basically done, because we have this ethic, this ethos, this understanding that it's just like it. We're not proofreading this to death. We're not editing it at all. Like, really, like, any of the stuff that we've done so far is just like, it's just out there. And so, I mean, yeah, you get it to where you're happy with it before you say it's like the real edition. But at the same time, like, if it's going to be up on the blog, I think people should be able to have it in their hands is all.
No. Yeah. I mean, fair point.
We can always figure this out later, but these are the kinds of things we're working on in the background. And so I'll just throw a few things in here at the end of this, and that's just to say that, like, I've written like 100 pages of a new book just in the last like 2 months, and then I've been working on a book that I wrote last year and the year before that, and it's just like that one is it needs a lot of work. And then the most important book is the one that I'll be focusing on a lot. Hopefully when I'm in Finland, and maybe when I'm camping here in the next couple months. Anyway, I'll be focusing on it a lot. But big things coming. The channel's pretty dead because I am not. I mean, housing crisis and all that shit. It wouldn't be a plebe channel without a housing crisis every 6 months. But
Yeah, because you took a hiatus for a little bit and then you came back up. That was when I commented. I was like, "Damn, you're finally back up again." And then that's when you hit me up.
Mhm.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah. So but here's the thing though. The reason I'm staying up late and calling you both right now is because I know I just knew it wouldn't be possible, it wouldn't happen if it was later, if it was planned, if it was going to be longer form. It just can't happen. And so I keep being like, oh, I need to do a stream, but it's like I don't have the time to do a stream. So this will suffice for the time being, but I hope to do that conversation with you, Mikey, here in the next month. And then
Yeah, I do too.
I can't make promises about anything else. There's other things, but here's the thing. I can't make promises about things, but I can also spontaneously make something happen
Yeah.
when I want to. And
Exactly.
and when I feel the pressure of I've only got another month to do this, we'll see what happens, is all I'm saying. So
Yeah.
there could be some cool shit coming, but I really don't want to make promises because here's the coolest thing that is coming. It's the shit that we're writing. So, and that goes for all of you. It goes for me, and it goes for Nick as well. It goes for Bryan. Bryan's working on something he's been working on all year that he'll be probably not ready to show the world until like spring. There's just a lot of stuff like kind of like Elton LK, who wrote the foreword to my book. He's the podcast Working Class Intelligentsia. Michael's met him. Elton's great, and he has so his podcast Working Class Intelligentsia. He came up with a manifesto. It's called like the Working Class Intelligentsia Manifesto. I don't know if it's published just yet, but I went to a meeting where it was discussed and everything like that. And I've been in a point where I'm like doing a radical, suspension of all of my master signifiers or anything that might be one, and trying to get back to the major questions, concerns, problems, and then concepts, but not concepts before those things. To the degree that I'm able, and I'm not able to get myself outside of language, so I just have to take on a lot of perspectives that are contradictory and work through them. And so that's what I've been doing. And I've got like 10 research threads that I'm on while I'm working at Amazon. And so it's like once a week for 36 hours, I just go hard and listen for 36 hours straight to so much stuff. Like I've been working on Capital Volume 1, the Grundrisse, the 1844 manuscripts, like six books about those things, Being in Time, History of the Concept of Time. And then I've got like 10 other books that are attached to different research threads. And these research threads, I'm playing them like a guitar, but here's the thing is that the reason I have to do this, besides being like ADHD, is because if I listen to one thing, then I want to go further on that research thread. I can't listen to the next thing on that thread too soon. And I also can't listen to the same thing all night. And so, like I listened to Capital for like 5 hours last night. But, I also did a bunch of other stuff. Like I'm doing this like punk, hardcore, metal, rock, rap, underground research thread. And and that's all. And that's actually multiple threads if you think about it, obviously. And so it's just, and then there's like the Crime and Punishment reading group I'm in. So it's like whenever the channel's really silent and I haven't sent an email out or said much in an email, it's because I'm living and I'm refueling and I'm conceptualizing and I'm fucking overhauling everything. And so I know that there's a handful of people still hanging on when they get a notification on the channel, and they still look forward to like stuff dropping and things like that. And so it's like that's why I wanted to bring them in on the updates, because it's like there's a lot of cool shit, everybody.
Yeah.
So just stay tuned.
No, and I mean, I feel the same way about my blog. Like, the blog keeps doing great. Like, it constantly gets good numbers and just keeps going up and up. But I don't have any time to really do the type of posts that I was doing before, because everything is geared around writing my main book that, has been 4 years in the making or whatever. And I just can say, like, I understand what you're going through, because in attention economy, if you're not putting out new shit, if you're not visible, it's like you basically died.
Yeah.
Like, no, every second of my life is geared towards me getting this book out. Like, all the other books we talk about me doing, like, yeah, like, I have ideas for 20 books or whatever. None of those matter, though. Like, like I've said, the only reason I exist is to write this one book. Like, it's a unique thing. And like, I don't care if I have to not write blog posts for another year or so.
Yeah.
Like, this is, and again, it's like it's the reason I exist, and like, not objectively, it's my own. Like, I'm making it the meaning I exist, but that's what it is for me. And like, it's the only thing that I know that no one else can write. Like, that's part of the goal of it, is like,
Right.
okay, you can say I have a talent for unpacking Lacanian concepts, but somebody else can do that too. Like, I
True.
mean, I'm not the only person on earth that can explain what OJA is in a clear way. Like, but the main book is something I feel like I don't think anybody else could write this. And so that's why, like, yeah, I can't focus on doing a bunch on the blog right now. I can't focus on the smaller books. Like, I have to look, it's a nice coincidence that, like, writing the main book or working on the main book, I accidentally wrote a mini book that we're going to put out, and that's great. But that was by accident. Like, I didn't even mean to write a book, but I did. And so,
to be fair, you wrote that right after you were like, "Oh, I've got to get back to my book," and then you're like, "Oops, I wrote the big other post," but you're still sitting on it, but it's basically a book. So,
well, and that's that's the one I want to put up on the blog as like the big post, at least for this year, because
good.
That one, I have sit on it. I have to give it an ending, and I have to connect this one. There's like a cut in the middle of it that has to be connected. I have to connect the dots there. But that one wouldn't take me long, and that one I want that up on the blog as soon as possible. But again, but I wrote that nearly a year ago.
Yep.
Yeah, it was like nearly a year ago I wrote that. So
feels pretty recent, but yeah, because I think I've listened to it at least twice.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I gotta get going, so
okay.
I'm gonna hop off. So it was great chatting with y'all.
Good,
All right,
good talking to you, Andrew. Take care.
Take care.
Take care, man. Yeah, I think he's like at work. I think he's at work.
Okay.
But this is the last thing that I want to do here. Is just to be like, I know that the conversation we're gonna have about Lacan and Žižek later this month is going to do a lot, and I'm really excited about all the stuff that it's going to do. But there was a question that DDD shared about like subjectivity, like, because he's reading Molly-Ann Rothenberg's book, Obsessive Subject.
Which is it's a classic in Lacanian circles.
Right. And he's like, he's kind of not getting it. He said he's just kind of failing to get the point of it. Like, why is it so important to have, like, how is missing this theory of the subject, or which is, it's basically Lacan's theory of the subject. What's what's wrong with that? Like, what's the point? I get that, like, in the conversation we had with McGowan and everyone else in defense of theory, one of the things we were talking about that Marxists especially can benefit from when it comes to Lacan through Žižek is a theory of the subject, because like the theory of ideology that most Marxists are working with is not one that has a very fleshed out subject. But how important is it that there's like this split subject? It's a Mobius. Why does it matter? And I know we can't talk about it right now in very much
Well, I
detail.
can give you a quick answer to that.
I knew I could trick you into talking. Do it.
Look, the quick answer is that, all right, like, so this is part of the issue. Like, why does when Žižek says to be a Marxist today, you have to go through Lacan? The point is, Marxists and leftists in general, despite their anti-capitalism, tend to presuppose, first off, it's funny, the left has never, when you think of like great leftist thinkers, they themselves have never come up. Who's a great leftist thinker that created a theory of the subject that's like a robust, I'm talking like a theory of the subject on the level of Lacan or Heidegger and Being and Time.
It would be Sartre's probably the closest, wouldn't it be?
Sartre's the closest, but he's I mean, then the question is, right, like, okay, but how does Being and Nothingness work with critique of dialectical like, it's not clear like that. And first off, those books are both such huge books that, I mean, maybe, but look, here's the point. The left wants to change the world. Okay, good. I want the world to change too. And the left knows that to change the world, it takes mobilizing human beings. But what's a human being? And I'm not, like, they can act like, oh, well, that's like unnecessary. We all know what human beings are. Like, okay, well, if it's so easy to mobilize them to achieve certain goals, why can't you do it?
Yeah, what's the problem?
It's a fucking problem.
Like, here's a good example. Catron was like, "It's my colleagues." He said, I love the quote. He's like, he's all, "It's my fucking colleagues. They keep getting to the students before I do, with filling their heads with Deleuze and Guattari and all this other bullshit."
Okay, then what was the problem before Deleuze and Guattari?
Right, exactly. I think that was. I mean, think about it. That was a long time later.
Yeah. So what was the problem before that? So
Yeah.
the problem is that they kind of take Homo economicus, that human beings are rational actors pursuing their self-interest, and all you have to do is rationally explain to them what's in their self-interest, and that will get them to mobilize and change the world so as to achieve what's in their rational. It doesn't fucking work.
Yeah.
Because human beings are not primarily concerned with achieving what's in their self-interest. They are a contradiction. They are a tug of war between what's in their self-interest and what undermines that self-interest, which we call the difference between pleasure and jouissance, or enjoyment. It's pleasure versus enjoyment, and they are not the same. And
homeostasis versus intensity. Yeah.
Or excessive, balance versus excessive disequilibrium, right? And that's the whole thing, is that human beings get enjoyment from giving themselves too much trouble. Like, that's how Lacan talks about it in Seminar 11, is too much trouble. And that's part of what I was trying to do in Žižek at work, and what I will really do in the longer book version. Like, I see this shit every day at my job. Like, people, like, this idea of, we just need to inform people and develop class consciousness, which class consciousness, when you think about it, it's a large scale knowledge and awareness of what is in our rational self-interest through class identification and class unity and solidarity. And yet nobody wants that shit. Or at least, if, like, they don't want it if that's all it is. Like, and so the right always has this advantage. Like the right is got it made when it comes to mobilizing jouissance. They're far more tapped in at a gut level of how to appeal to people's libidinal economies, how to seduce them, so to speak, than the left is. Like the left just wants to inform and raise awareness, and there's nothing seductive in that. And that's the issue, is that how do you seduce people from, some sort of leftist emancipatory project? And that's what us Lacanians are trying to tell Marxists or leftists of any kind. Like, you got to learn how to seduce people.
I think that this is definitely a line that is, I mean, like, think about it. One of the main things that these theorists will say is like the issue. I mean, I think Bierman said this in the last conversation I had with him. Žižek obviously talks about it, but it's a common refrain, I think, in theory, to say that, the workers don't seem to want their liberation in any serious way. Like, you try to talk to them, they don't want it. Like, this is a theory, is a reaction to, like, the revolution happened, but then things went back to normal. So what's going on? What gives? And in a sort of sense, it's reflecting on a failure or a series of failures, or or you could say, a theory is supposed to be taking account of reality, and so it's supposed to adapt to reality. And you're talking about this as sort of like, we got to understand psychology to be able to do rhetoric, is kind of part of what it sounds like. But it's not just rhetoric, obviously. But
what I'm talking about, I would say ontology, but whatever.
Okay, well, that's fair. Well, actually, is it fair? Explain what you mean.
Well, I mean, I'm saying, like,
you're talking about seducing people.
Say what?
You're talking about ontology for the sake of seducing people.
Well, now, okay. Okay. No, I'm saying that, okay, there's nothing enticing about the liberal left in America. Like, that's why most people are put off by it. And if they vote for Democrats or whatever, it's simply because from their position, the excessive or racist, or however they frame it, enjoyment of the right is too much of a threat. So we'll do the lesser of evils. But the point is, the left can't mobilize people. Like, it can't get them true. Like, nobody is emphatic about anything left right now. And the question is, like, how do you do that? Well, you're not going to do it simply by just saying, the minimum wage needs to be raised, because like, just quoting statistics or facts and trying to inform people, which is so much of what I see going on. Like, they don't care. That's not how you appeal to people and mobilize them. And, like, again, like, it takes as its starting point, like, people don't know what's going on. Ideology has made them not see the truth of their material conditions. So let's inform them about the truth of their material conditions. And if we build that collective awareness into class consciousness, they will act in their self-interest and change. I don't think so. I think it has to be done in a totally different way. And so based on based on the ontology of the subject as I understand it.
Gotcha. And this is part of, obviously, then what you're doing. And I want to add that a fundamental aspect of Marx's theory is that it takes into account it is supposed to be able to take into account the standpoint of the theorist as well. And it's supposed to be able to somehow get itself out of a circle. And the person who takes on the standpoint of, say, the working class, or of the revolutionary, or of the theorist, or of all three, has to understand the fucking world, but also understand I'm part of this world, and I'm perceiving this world. I'm not outside of the discourse or theory or analysis of this world. And so So how do I factor into the interpretation of this world? I want to change the world, but I also have already interpreted the world. I already understand myself as a certain type of subject. So part of this is also personal, individual liberation. And that's my big thing, is that no matter what kind of world we want to live in, it's kind of getting ahead of ourselves if we also don't understand ourselves. And so it's just like, you cannot do the two things separately. And obviously, like, the nice thing about this sort of like reading and trying to understand and talking about all of these different thinkers is that we get a bunch of different radical takes on the same phenomenon. We need a lot of radical takes on the same phenomenon and different complete reconceptualizations of that phenomenon, so that we can, to some degree, get outside of doxa, outside of common sense, just the taken for granted background conditions of average everydayness. That means in a lot of ways you can take on a framework like Marxism or whatever, or an ideology, but you actually don't know in what ways that has adapted to your subjectivity, your desire. You're part of it, and so you're not outside of this. And so understanding that you are a split subject, and that desire and drive are not the same thing in the way that they relate. And like for me, I'm still reeling after your message from last week, where you talked about the circuit of partial drives, and this is fucking changing how I think about everything now, and it's connecting a lot of dots. It's connecting dots throughout all of the conversations we've had, including the ones, the 4 parts on Lacan, and then the 3 on Žižek so far. So,
well, yeah. So, look, I mean, it's a million ways to come at it, but I mean, look, another thing is, okay, capitalism doesn't allow people to have their time energy. Capitalism doesn't.
Shit. Bryan's in the chat.
Hey, hold on.
Hey,
I'm
what's up?
trying to turn speaker on and stuff.
All right, yeah.
There
So,
we go.
Michael,
Sorry.
are you able to? Mike,
I was out at lunch with the family. We're just getting
can you
home.
bookmark that?
What?
Can you bookmark that just for a second?
I just don't worry about it. Like, I was just going to keep going on the same point, but whatever, it's fine.
No, because I want to see how you tie it into time energy. Bryan, basically, you're coming in on the tail end of a conversation that's being recorded for my channel, and it's just a quick update, me explaining what's going on with the studio and the plans and the book writing process. I mentioned that you are, like us, working on something that you're writing, and I said it probably won't be something that anyone sees until spring or something like that, but yeah.
Gotcha.
But I haven't ever introduced you. Well, it's, if I've ever even talked about you, like it's in passing, or like really quickly, everybody in the world, this is Bryan.
Howdy.
And we were just reading Kant's Groundworks, The Metaphysics of Morals, and now we're reading Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky. But we also have read a lot of books.
At least 2.
At least 2. Yeah, well, I mean, there's at least 2 that we've read that we're probably going to reread. And the main one was Being in Time, but we also read Saussure, and we've read Kant, we've read Derrida, and all this other stuff. But we just read Totality and Infinity last year. And
Agamben.
And Agamben. Levinas is someone I never talk about on my channel, even though he's someone I think with every day. And so it's like, even though I struggle with him a lot, I argue with him. But like, you know, I just have never talked about it on my channel. It's so funny that like he's not really on TheoryTube. One done was like, who? Levinas? What? And it's just like, oh, yeah, really important theorist. I mean, he's such an important theorist. So I mean,
He's
Mike,
one of
you're not Levinas,
the greatest thinkers of ethics that ever lived. Like, whether or not, you know, I have my disagreements with Levinas, but like, okay, there's like what, Aristotelian ethics, utilitarianism, Kantian ethics, and then there's Levinas. Like, he's that important as a ethicist.
Yeah, and there's almost like no... I haven't found a decent podcast dealing with Levinas yet.
No, I agree. Like, for some reason, he doesn't... I don't know. He doesn't appeal to you're like Theory Tube, or I don't know.
I think nobody likes the way that Butler uses him, and that's all there is. That's just what it is. So it's like
Yeah, but that's in that one book. I don't know how many people have even read the book you're talking about.
Well, I mean, in the theory world, I think everyone's probably encountered Butler's usage of Levinas,
Yeah,
where it's
maybe,
just like
yeah.
for people outside the discourse, and that's most people, almost like everybody in my life and on this channel. I'll just say that Judith Butler is obviously very famous for Gender Trouble and Bodies That Matter and Notes Towards Performative Theory of Justice and all these other books, and she's been around for a long time and is big in gender theory and other things. And so, and she's controversial for a lot of reasons, but she's worth thinking through. And so, but the way she uses Levinas is basically just like, yeah, so we have an infinite obligation to the other. We've got to live for the other, sacrifice for the other. The other is vulnerable. We've got to care for the other. The face of the other is there's things that she does to correct or adapt into her
Levinas.
system. She's running him into a system where she's also using Foucault. She's also using Lacan.
No, say what it is. She pulls Levinas.
She pulls Levinas. That's actually, I don't know if I'd say anything she does is just straight up id pull. I think that's just more how she's used, but maybe I'm wrong. She's definitely not a Marxist in any real sense. Like, she doesn't really have, I don't think, like, I know she will add class into things, but I don't think she has any very serious sense of political economy. And then people are like, oh my God, she donated to a Kamala campaign. And I'm like, look, I don't fucking know why she donated to a Kamala campaign. Like, that doesn't have to be what her politics is. She might just want to be able to actually speak to somebody who has some influence. Like, that's not, whatever. Anyway, look, the only reason I brought it up is I do really want to do stuff on Levinas. I look forward to doing stuff on Levinas. Part of the reason I haven't is because I have to read Otherwise Than Being a couple times first. I don't want to get out ahead of myself on that one. And anyway, Bryan, everyone in the call, Andrew was in here for a little bit as well for the first half of the conversation. And he gave his little update on what he's working on. Michael gave his update. I gave my update. Do you want to just say what you're working on in quick, whatever you take, as long as you want, really?
Sure, it'll probably be pretty quick because I didn't even know what I was getting into when I joined this call. And I think Tara's waiting for me. But no, I've been working on a pretty thorough study of just the phenomenological literature in general. This summer, I've read everything from Husserl to rereading Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, some Sartre, and some other less famous phenomenologists. And currently, I'm working through Levinas a little more carefully. I just started Otherwise Than Being, which is certainly more challenging than Totality Infinity, which was already challenging as it is.
Yeah.
But it sucks that there's
really
no good commentaries on it.
Sorry, was that Mikey?
I say it sucks that there's no good commentaries on it. That also is a problem.
Yeah, so really what it comes down to is reading the sort of French phenomenologists who came after him, who use him to kind of get an idea of how he's being read. That's the best you can do.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of part of it. And then his essays are helpful because you don't have to, spend months on end with.
Have you read Ethics and Infinity yet?
Yeah, I read it the first time last week. It was a bit over my head, so I'm going to go back to it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, he deals with so many different concepts than he does in Totality and Infinity. The whole sort of conceptual universe is different. So it's almost a reorienting in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But what
Otherwise Than Being or in Ethics and Infinity?
All of his later writing. Or was Ethics and Infinity, or was that pre? I can't even remember now.
Well, I'm referring to it's the little interview book.
Oh no, then I haven't read that. I'm thinking of a
Oh,
different essay
okay.
then.
So no, so ethics and I believe that's the name. It was an interview that he did, and it's one of the best. Like it's the most accessible Levinas book there
Oh,
is. When
perfect. Okay.
like that's definitely, if you haven't read it, you got to read it. He's so crystal clear in that, as opposed to his really theoretical writings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good
I
to know.
should
I can probably find a copy of that online.
I'll say
should
I
make
might have a PDF I can send to you.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
make a quick plug here. Bryan and I had a conversation with Andrew, and it's up on his channel actually, so people can check that out if they want. Master of Signified Bodies channel. But we talked about Heidegger, and
And there's a cute baby in that video,
there is a cute
Mhm.
baby.
if I have to say so myself.
I forget what I was going to say about that video because something you were both just talking about made me think of it. But anyway, it's good, and phenomenology is great, and I've been constantly working on phenomenology and critique of political economy and stuff like that. And so we're going to be reading Capital here within the next 6 months, and so that's really exciting. That's kind of why I'm going over it right now.
That is
But
really exciting.
gosh, yeah. And you've got a writing project that you're working on. You've got ideas. I can't wait to talk to you about those some more. But just like I mean, what you're working on is one of the most important pieces of like what I've been thinking about as well. So it's really exciting that you're doing this right now.
Yeah, I
And,
think it's something you and I have been thinking about for probably the last 5 years together in some way or another.
Yep.
For your listeners, it's dealing with obsession, a sort of phenomenology of obsession, rethinking it. It usually is kind of conveyed in a negative light. To be an obsession is a problem, but I want to rethink that. And as a public educator in the K-12 system, and I teach students at an alternative school who are either on the edge of dropout or gonna drop out, don't give a shit about being there, and just totally deviate from the sort of social norm of what a sort of good student is on their way to like a normal life. The idea of deviance is sort of something I've been thinking about for the last couple of years. I just finished a master's, and that was a pretty big topic I spent time focusing on. And more, I'm thinking through connections between sort of deviance, as far as like deviating from a norm, and obsession, and being preoccupied with things of interest, and then mastery is all these other things that go along with it. And so that's kind of like the bigger project that I feel like I'm just at the beginning of, though, even though I've been thinking certain things for many years. I feel like I'm finally getting to a point where I can start thinking through the pieces of it rather than the sort of general 10,000 foot view kind of knee-jerk feelings.
But none of that was really in your thesis. At your MA thesis, it was about Agamben and like critical pedagogy, right?
Yeah, well, so I wrote a lot of papers for courses dealing with a lot of what I was just talking about. The thesis itself, I think, a lot of the stuff having to do with like use and like the highest poverty sort of text from Agamben do relate in a way. But
Yeah.
rereading Heidegger has definitely given me some more space to think about like what Agamben's talking about when he gets into sort of thinking about potential as opposed to act. You know, he really takes up that sort of discourse. And so, and which is huge for half of being in time. That's really important. So,
yeah. And the reason I brought up the video, I just remembered, was because Michael, I don't know if you'll care if I say this, but Mikey was like, "That's Bryan."
No, what I was saying is like, it's crazy. Like when I met Bryan was not into theory at all. And like, like over the years, because I haven't talked to Bryan very much over the years, but it's like every time I talk to Bryan, he's like super leveled up on theory. And it's just like, God damn, like, how'd you do this?
Yeah.
I read a lot.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's
But
great.
no, like, it's crazy. Like, from standing back, I'm just like, it's crazy to see how much of a theorist and a thinker you've become.
So,
And it's really cool.
I appreciate that.
I don't know if you okay. We all got to go, but just really quick, I just put out that conversation with Bruce Bierman. He's got critiques of psychoanalysis and Lacan, and it comes down to he believes in a hierarchy of desires, and he's working on his own phenomenology of desire, but it's a huge project. He's not going to let anyone know about any of it until he drops it, and so right now all he does is appeal to basic arguments that he's mostly taking from like the Cynics and from like the Socrates, from stuff, and just from the history of philosophy. But he's working on something epic. And but the thing is I don't think he's that familiar with the Lacan that we understand or that we've studied or that at least that Michael and I have talked about. And so I don't think he knew about the pleasure jouissance distinction. So it just kind of it was really cool because I'm a huge fan of everything he's got going on, and because he turned me on to philosophy and theory in the first place, and well, not philosophy but theory, or at least phenomenology and stuff like that. So but the thing that Michael told me last week, Michael, I don't know if you even want to bring it up at all, but I have to at least.
I'm not going into the whole.
Okay.
Because it's one of those things I'm working on right now. Like I don't have it all worked out yet.
Okay, that's perfect. So just this will be like a sort of cliffhanger. Is there's reasons that there are that this misses the mark in various ways, and I learned about the circuit of partial drives, and it just blew my fucking mind. And the last week, I just can't stop thinking about it. I just want to read up on drive really bad, and it's really important for obsession. And so, a drive is not the same thing as desire, and no drive is isolated or exists on its own. And there's a complicated way that your libidinal economy forms, and this just it's all very important stuff that I want to understand better. And
so hold on, but here's the thing: the other thing that's missing here, if we're going to talk about obsession, there's drive and desire, but there's also demand. And so what the obsessional neurotic does, and here's the thing, Bryan, I don't know if you've read it or not. Have you read Bruce Fink's a Lacanian and a clinical introduction to Lacanian psychoanalysis?
No, but I've heard you talk about it. The only one we read was the shorter one. What is that?
Lacanian Subject.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: the best book he wrote. I know everybody Lacanian Subject was popular for a while, but it's not his best book. The clinical introduction is by far his best book, and there's a whole he's the only Lacanian I know who's really okay. There's another guy named Joel Dorr who did this, but to be honest, Joel Dorr's book is not nearly as readable or accessible as Fink's is. The clinical structures are still I'm always I've bugged Todd a bunch. I'm like, will you please put out some do the clinical structures? Lacanians don't really ever just lay out let's do the basic parameters of obsessional neurosis. Let's do hysterical neurosis. Let's do perversion. Let's do psychosis. And then now it gets complicated because Jacques-Alain Millier, his whole thing about ordinary psychosis, it's another thing. And then Leon Brenner thinks autism is its own clinical structure. So it's complicated. Point is, though, those three, the classics, the neurosis, perversion, psychosis. Fink's book does the best job of laying them out. And so whatever you're doing with obsession, you need to have Lacan's idea of obsessional neurosis to work with. And part of what the neurotic does, or I should say the obsessional does, is okay, the other's desire is that elusive dimension of them, right? Like people demand things, but their desire transcends the demand, and what they demand isn't actually what they desire. They want something else. What the obsessional does, though, is zero in on the demand and take the demand as if it's the desire. And so they will fixate on some activity. They think like if I just, fulfill the other's demand, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, it'll, satisfy the other. And then that somehow that they'll get their enjoyment from satisfying the other's demand. And the point is the other's demand is always like you can't base yourself on the other's demand because the other's a split subject. And so, but that's one of the things that makes an obsessional is that they're always fixated on the demand. They think that they have to satisfy, so they get caught up. I mean, this is why, obsessionals are big on like following orders or doing their duty or whatever. Like they put so much, there's so much stock in the other's demand, right? But again, the other's demand is always like, you can't really base anything in your life off of the other's demand. And yet, because the other's desire, that's alterity, it's otherness, it's evasive, it's never fixed, it's mysterious, right? Obsessionals don't like that. Like obsessionals fixate on their egos and their self-identity, and they block out the other. Like, I mean, again, now I'm starting to describe like typical male behavior or the way it's traditionally thought of. And that's why most guys traditionally are obsessionals. And so even sexuation gets brought into the mix here. But the point is that obsessionals are doing what they're doing because they think they have to fulfill a certain demand, the other's demand. And that is the key to unlocking enjoyment.
Mm.
And so, but Dave, I mean, to follow your point,
I think without really having a grasp on how you're using demand and desire, the last 2 minutes, to be fair, you said you can't get into it, but like that just sounds like a lot of demand, desire, demand, desire.
Well, again, like this is simple, right? Like a demand is like something explicitly demand, like I want you to do X, right? Like it's something that's explicitly stated. And so but the obsessional, like they don't understand, like when somebody tells you to do something, like to truly understand what they want you to do is not to take the demand too seriously. It's the same thing with ideology, right? Like ideology, do this, don't do that, don't do that. But then like with inherent transgression, like we've talked about a million times, yeah, but like there's always a yeah, but, right? Like, yeah, these are the official rules. This is what's officially, expected of you. But there's also like loopholes and ways around it. You shouldn't take it too seriously. And the obsessional ends up taking demands or ideological mandates or political objectives too seriously for their own good. And that's part of the issue. And it's because the obsessional doesn't want to deal with desire, which is okay. Like I'm going to use the example that I used a bunch. It's Peter Rollins. Okay. Because it's the best example I can think of. The kid is about to start school. The parents sit the kid down and say, hey, we believe in nonviolence in this family. It's never okay to hit. It's never okay to fight. We expect you to go to school and not punch and not fight. Okay. Well, the kid starts school, and soon after, the kid starts to get bullied on a routine basis. And every time the kid goes to school, the bully terrorizes him and blah, 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 blah. So it becomes a whole thing. And one day the kid finally has enough and hauls off and punches the bully and gives him a bloody nose. All right. Well, the kid goes home and the parents sit him down and the parents say, hey, we told you we don't hit in this family. All right. We told you that that's not the way to go. It's never right to hit. And yet the kid can detect in the parents a certain happiness, a certain pleasure in the fact that he hit the boy. So they're saying don't hit him, but this other unspoken part of them, he's detecting like, yeah, but they're glad I did. Even though that what, like they're saying don't hit him, but I can tell they're happy that I did. Or you can reverse it. He just keeps getting beaten up, and he finally goes home one day, and they keep telling him like, you know, we're very proud of you that you don't engage in violence or whatever. But he detects in them a disappointment in him.
Yeah.
This is the split between demand and desire. So the demand is don't engage in violence. The desire is punch that motherfucker in his face.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about here.
So how just to tie it all up. So I know what Bryan's working on is a lot more focused on the what it feels like. Bryan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if you had to mute and go take care of a baby or something.
Not yet.
Cool. But when we've talked about obsession, it's just like we're obsessionals through and through. Like, and we really need something to be. This is why time energy matters so much to us, right? Like we need it so that we can actually do. Oh, Andrew's back in the chat.
Yeah.
Another
I'm back.
another obsessional is in the chat. Welcome.
Yeah, I had to drive on base real quick.
This is Obsessionals Anonymous. Welcome to Obsessions Anonymous. And
No,
yeah,
my whole thing is now I'm to this later Lacan, and I'm like, are we not actually obsessionals? Are we not neurotics anymore? Are we ordinary psychotics? It's a whole nother thing. But
see, I mean, that's like really like why I feel like I need to go read that Fink, because the difference between a neurotic and a psychotic is still like totally a mystery to me at this point. Like a lot of those clinical structures, you're right, because they get used. Like if I'm listening to Y Theory, like Todd and Ryan will talk about them, but not really just spend time breaking down the various structures. And
no, I mean, I'm gonna, next time I talk to Todd, I'm gonna say it's time. You have to do the clinical structures, like, and
they got to be
my thing
hunting
is
for
like, I
episode
want to write a
ideas
blog.
anyway.
Say what?
I said they have to be hunting for episode ideas anyway by this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm like, okay, like this needs to happen. But okay, so you get into this whole thing, like, all right, well, a demand is a symbolic mandate. Like a demand has to do with the symbolic. Whereas it's weird because the question is, what do we mean by obsession? Like, obsession can also be tied into the synthome in a sense. Like, the synthome is this later concept from seminar 23. And so here's what you got. The basic difference between a neurotic and a psychotic is that the psychotic has foreclosed the name of the father. Now, there's a bunch of blue jargon. What it means is that the psychotic has fundamentally rejected the prohibition of jouissance. I do not accept that there are prohibitions on my enjoyment. That's what it boils down to. Because the name of the father is, like, we can call it a signifier, but it's really like a signifying element, or what it's the key aspect of the symbolic order, which is to say, hey, if you're going to be a member of the symbolic order, which is to say, if you are going to be socialized, you have to compromise your enjoyment. Now, the funny thing is, and this is a locating point, to do this, there's no, like, you don't actually give up anything. Like, it's funny, we call it symbolic castration, but the only thing you give up is something that's retroactively constituted. Like, I had to give up this pure, unadulterated jouissance, but in reality, that's only a retroactive fantasy after prohibition. Like, you didn't have it to begin with. But the point is, the cost of symbolic castration, which is to say the cost of socialization, is you have to give up something you don't have. And that's like, there's like the Lacanian enigmatic way of putting it. But the point is, like, you have to give up a type of enjoyment that you don't actually have.
In Nietzsche, this is the caged animal.
Okay, I'm not familiar with this, or if I was, I don't remember it.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure this is in the genealogy, or it's Beyond Good and Evil. But he's talking about how, like, I mean, Freud gets a lot from Nietzsche, right? And it's just like, it's the idea of repression, but it's just like, you're constantly, no, you can't do this, you have to do this, you can't do that, you got to do this, you can't do that, you got to do this. You're like this caged animal,
Mm-hmm.
You're like you're like domesticated, like this little cucked animal. The perfect example of it is Walter White in Breaking Bad. But
the point is, like, you're worse if you're a psychotic. Like, the whole point is, like, this is the later Lacan of Le Non du Père. Like,
okay,
or like where Le Non. Okay, so this is another play on words. So the name of the father is Le Nom du Père, right, in French. Well, in seminar, what is it? I believe it's 21. He does a homophony where it's Le Non dupes errant, which is to say the non-duped, the people who are not duped, are the ones who err. Like, if you refuse to be duped, you end up in error. And so the point is, the psychotic refuses to be duped by the symbolic, and because they refuse to be duped, they err. Like, the fiction is the truth. Like, yes, the symbolic order is a contingent matrix. It's not absolute, but if you don't allow yourself to be tricked by it or to be integrated into it, you are fucking duped. You're lost. And like, this is the whole point, right? We all know we have this relationship to the law, and that there's a symbolic order, and that we can do this whole thing. Like, we know that we have laws in place, and yet they've been contingent and they're not absolute. But the point is, if you don't accept the parameters of this basic matrix, then you're just forever lost. Like, you're not tapped into anything. You're like you're forever outside the symbolic. And this is why, like, they don't, like, the psychotic doesn't have the ability to use language or navigate social interactions the way we do, because we're all collectively duped together by the symbolic. And because we're collectively duped, we're in the greater truth than they are. And so the point is, the neurotic is defined by the fact that they accept prohibition, they repress. There's a fundamental repression. Like, I can't have the absolute enjoyment whenever I want it the way I want. Like, I have to repress, which is, I mean, early in Lacan, it's linked to the mother, all of this kind of stuff. But what it boils down to is their neurotic sacrifices the enjoyment they never had, and in doing so, enter the symbolic, enter into prohibition, enter into socialization, and the psychotic rejects all of that.
And is this rejection the disavowal, or does that come into more the perverse?
That's perversion. Structure? That's the difference. Perversion. It's like, perverts are the ones that I think most Lacanians would tell you perverts are the rarest of the rare, because what they do is they walk this weird line. They're kind of neurotic and they're kind of psychotic, and that's a whole nother thing.
Because like, if they get some enjoyment from some fantasy, like, there's never really guilt or shame, right, in perverts.
Well, that's part of it, and part of it is, like, they make themselves like the instrument of the law. Like, like, part of it is, like, the people who, like, the Spanish Inquisitors, right, or certain fascists or what, like, anybody who just can brutalize other people because they're serving the law. That's like part of what it is to be a sadist. And again, but this, like, the whole thing with perversion, like, that's a whole nother, because the main difference is neurosis and psychosis. When you get into perversion, it's a whole complicated thing because you have the sadist, you have the masochist, you have the fetishist, and like, again, all of this is stuff I want to do a blog post on the clinical structures, right? But it would help if I had Todd if Todd did something, it would save me a lot of trouble, because I like his video on the phallus is what really enabled me to write the big ass blog post on it, because he connected he gave me enough insights initially where I'm like, okay, it clicks now. Now I can really take it and run with it. And I want to do the same thing with the clinical structures. But the best we have right now is that Bruce Fink book.
Speaking of your blog post, Bryan, I told Andrew and Mikey earlier that you'd coined the term the Mikey standard.
That's funny.
I did.
Yeah. And so what I want to just say, the relevancy for all of this is just like, okay, in your situation, Bryan, you're dealing with troubled youths. These are kids that are like not gonna make it, right? Unless like something, unless a miracle happens. And so, we all are like in our own ways, like dropouts and fuck ups and shit. And so it's like we relate to people who are going through that stage of life,
Right. I mean, like the whole question is like, how do we take like a description of like a sort of structure, like a clinical structure, and then map it onto the actual real world, which is, if we were all fuck ups and we still don't fit in to sort of normal, polite society in certain ways, we're not fuck ups in the same way either. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
right. Yeah.
And so what that is still very unclear to me. And that's, I mean, if anything, and if someone's already figured that out, like, that would be awesome. But like, for my students, just like it was for me in high school, it's like your options are prison, which is more likely than anything for many of them, and kind of just living like one day to the next, hoping you can just make it through, and probably having nothing more than that. Or there's like something that happens with certain people that go from there, like myself included, to like not assimilating into just the sort of normal expectations that the world has for you, but exceeding them in some way. Right? So there's like an excessiveness to what we do, that obsessional, but it's not destructive in the way it was for me before. But it's still, it's still very much like, yeah, I'm not content with what the world wants for me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not fully content. Like, I had the 9 to 5 and a paycheck that was pretty good and bound to get much better in the future and all this stuff and solid prospects, but deeply miserable. Like, that's not for me. But neither is, just waking up and drinking and smoking weed all day.
And part of it is, I mean, this goes back to Dave's point, which is the thing we want is our time energy. We want, which is
100%.
We want the ability to live our best lives, which is exactly what capitalism has told us to do since the day we were born.
Right.
But the very thing it demands of us, live your best life, it also prevents us from doing.
Yeah.
So we're caught in this deadlock of, well, the social duty now is to live your best life. YOLO, right?
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, the very symbolic order that commands this of you is the one that makes it impossible because of the material conditions. So that's part of why I think all of us are so depressed, is because we want to take the demands. Like, you want me to live my best life? Okay, cool. Let's do it. Oh, but you won't let me. So,
Hey, I just want to say I'm not fucking depressed. I am like I feel like I'm in a boxing match, and every time I sit down on the bench and go, all right. So what do I have? Like 5 minutes before the next round? Okay, cool. I'm gonna drink some water, and then it's smack right in the face, and it's like, nope, back at it, bitch. And it's like,
Yep, that's exactly how I feel. I just feel pissed off. I'm like, God damn, why do I gotta be in here?
mhm.
but I gotta say, I'm not depressed. I'm just like, bitch, I'll fucking, oh, let's go. All right. I was like, that was a sucker punch. I'll jump back
Yeah,
up.
well, here's the thing. I'm the oldest one here, so it gets harder as you get older.
Oh,
There's
God.
there's a lot of youthful spirit. Like, youthful spirit can get you through a lot. When you hit 40 and you have no future, it's a little bit harder.
Oh, jeez. You're right, though. I mean, in a lot of people's cases.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, though, can it be better
So-
than worse? And for an obsessional who's never going to be able to integrate, assimilate, get disciplined into the society through the regular education system in the way that they're supposed to, what hope is there for them? And how can having an understanding of the subject and of desire and of drive and of obsession and of time energy help us make sense of how it is that someone like me is able to go from just through all the things that I've been through until now. And it's just like, I feel like in a lot of ways, theory, philosophy, like these things have supplied me with an arsenal of concepts and perspectives that, in a sort of sense, free me from just being a victim of my death drive all the time. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I can find myself in the grip of it, and I'm like, oh, that's good to know. That's good to see. I can actually kind of check that. I can actually brake pedal or like redirect, to some degree. I don't have very much control, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it. I feel like the concepts are liberating if you start to think through death drive, though. And for all of us, and Mikey, I think you might have been the first one to say it, but I keep talking about this. I definitely brought it up with Caleb Kane in that 5-hour conversation, and it blew his mind. But the reason death drive is important in understanding subjectivity and everything like this is just like, whether you grew up in the wood or the hood,
Yeah.
like, if you didn't have outlets that were like positive, like reinforcements with and like outlets, a lot of outlets for your partial drives to potentially latch onto. Like, if you didn't have a diversity of outlets and you're just operating at the level of like, it's food, like it's sleep, it's survive, or just like, or you're bored because you have time and energy, but they're fragmented, and you don't see anyone in your life who has found a way to fuse those into something meaningful outside of the profit motive or just surviving.
Especially in the hood too, like with
Especially.
death drive and like Oedipus complex, where it's like you don't have any of those like outlets for your jouissance, so you end up repeating what your father did, and then like you end up becoming part of the gangs, and you get into trouble, and then you constantly get arrested. Like I know that from my father too. So like, luckily we moved to a different area of the hood where it was like more calm, but then all of a sudden, like, more meth was coming in. Luckily, like, I had wrestling, but like, if I didn't have wrestling, like, I probably would have ended up like just like him.
Right? There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wrestling was something that your drive was able to latch onto. But there was also a moment in your development with wrestling when there was like you had to redirect. You instantly redirected to philosophy.
Exactly.
So look, part of it is like, this is where I want to bring in some Deleuze and Guattari. I think there's this point in this, like, yeah, like, we disagree, we're Lacanians, blah blah blah, but like, there's aspects of what I know about the death drive from the Lacanian perspective that I think DMG can help us with, and part of it is like, the whole reason, like, and this is all shit I haven't like, I have plans to write about it, but I haven't written about it. Like, the way I view time energy through Lacan is that having your time energy truly enables your drive to drift. And what I mean is, like Lacan himself talks about the drive as drift. Remember, like, Guy Debord wrote that essay, The Derive?
Yeah.
So Lacan uses the derive, which is like, I mean, I think Debord also calls it drifting, or maybe that's how it's translated. The drive also drifts. And the point is because, and this is something Lacan emphasizes in his theory of sublimation, that for Lacan, you can get the same satisfaction, the same drive satisfaction from a different object. And so this is different than the traditional theory of sublimation. The traditional theory says, hey, there's a primary form of sexual enjoyment. For whatever reason, you're not allowed to have that. That energy, though, can be sublimated or channeled into a different activity with a different object. And you're not going to get the same enjoyment, but you can get a substitute enjoyment. Lacan totally rejects that. He thinks that your partial drives can get the exact same satisfaction from different objects. And so, Bryan, you were talking about, like, how, like, your enjoyment has shifted, right? And, like, the point is, like, you can have a drive and it can want, like, a certain type of enjoyment, but the trick is, like, your life can be better off depending on what the object of the satisfaction is. Like, and that's part of what. So time energy, basically, and this is what I'm bringing in Deleuze and Guattari for. If you have your time energy, you have time to experiment. Your body, and you have the ability to experiment with different activities, different objects, and your body, your drive body, so to speak, your libidinal body can have the time to experiment with things and see what it latches onto. And the more opportunities it has to do different activities, the difference that it's a kind of freedom. Like, it's a weird freedom. It's not like freedom of the will, but it's freedom to get hooked on different activities.
Yeah.
And when poverty is just locks you in to whatever little bit of routine that you have, and, like, you can't vary it. So something as simple as, like, oh, I have extra money to go drive, like, I'm just gonna cruise. Cruising is like a thing of the past, but cruising used to, like, I'm just gonna cruise. Oh, I didn't know this place was here, let me go in this place. And then you know, because you got to cruise, you got to latch onto this new place, and all. Like, it sounds silly almost, but this form of, like, the more ability you have to experiment with different types of activities, the freer your libidinal economy can be.
Yeah.
And that's the point, is that without time energy and without money, you are locked into whatever tiny little circuit that the world provides you, and you're not able to get outside of that circuit.
It makes me think. It makes me think of when you're talking about the sublimation that Lacan was talking about, when he's like, "When I'm not fucking, I'm talking to you, but I get the same satisfaction as if I were."
That's what I'm referencing, is that part right there. So look, I mean, like, that's this whole thing, right? Like, the oral drive, he's getting sexual enjoyment, and see, this is where it's sexual. Like, this is why Zupancic's book is so great, because it clears up so much bullshit surrounding sexuality in psychoanalysis. Sexuality is the stimulation of your body parts, right? Like, and the point is, like, friends can do this to you, like, through having a conversation. Like, and so the point is, if they say, oh, well, having a conversation, you reduce everything to sex. And the point is, when somebody does that, I want to go, yeah, but you're reducing sex to, like, intercourse. And that's not what sex is for psychoanalysis. Like, the idea that, oh, everything's reducible to sex, they make it what we think of as sex in the standard sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sexuality is the ways in which our bodies enjoy.
Yeah, and that's what Freud was talking about too with erogenous zones. Like it's not just the
Exactly, and
penis that,
polymorphous perversity,
yeah.
and see, and like he established this concept of sex in those the early 3 essays.
Mhm.
And the point is, anybody who wants to throw, psychoanalysis, all it cares about is sex. Yeah, well, what is mean by sex? They think it means what everybody else means by sex, and it's a much broader concept of bodily stimulation, right? And so a conversation can be sexual, lecturing can be sexual, playing sports can be sexual, playing chess can be sexual, but it's in this broad sense of what gives our drives satisfaction
Mhm.
or jouissance. And so, yeah,
And can I add on to one more thing with that? With
Yeah, go ahead.
that jouissance, and like finding that satisfaction, is it almost trying to, in a sense, replicate? Well, maybe not replicate, but trying to find that satisfaction that happens in a sense, the lure of the mirror stage, where you have this kind of like feeling of wholeness and satisfaction.
So
with
here's
the
the thing,
image.
like this is where you get into this whole different thing. Like, so I don't know, like so the ego, like basically whatever jouissance is attached to, like, oh, I want to be whole, I want to be complete. That, I mean, that's phantasmatic, and and yes, in a sense, it's part of the ego, because this is where fantasy is part of the imaginary order. And imaginary order basically means the order in which we're attempting to be complete, to be whole, right? But the drives don't care anything about that. The drives aren't seeking completeness. Like, in fact, I mean, that's the whole point of death drive. Like, it's self-destruction, it's self-fragmentation, right?
Compulsory.
Like the partial drives. That's why Žižek likens them to like objects in horror movies, like a free floating hand, like a hand that's moving by itself, or eyes that like have a life of their own. And like, it's because our body parts, our eyes, our ears, they seek out their own forms of enjoyment, and it has nothing to do with egos or our collective like self-image or our fantasies of perfect enjoyment. Like, that's the trick of the drive. Like, desire is moving towards that. Desire is moving towards, I want the lost object that's going to complete me and make me whole. But drive is the part of us that undermines our like attempts to be whole, and gets like our actual enjoyment, our actual jouissance is how we prevent ourselves from getting the whole enjoyment that's actually impossible to get. Like, this is the key in understanding the difference between desire and drive. Desire is seeking the impossible object it can never get, but that if it could get would make it whole. But drive is what gets actual enjoyment from us not getting that object. So this is why we talk about drive circles objet petit a. When Lacanians say drive circles objet petit a, it means it's our path. It's the path we take to not get what we want. And so that's where actual enjoyment lies, in how like enjoying what we don't have is how Todd puts it. And so this is this weird dynamic, and the drives have a life of their own. Like, we're not in control of them. We don't like rule over them. We, in a sense, are tethered to them, and the subject kind of goes along for the ride. And so this is another way in which we're divided. Like, as like the lacking subject of desire, the negative subject, like, it's always pursuing objet, the externalization of its own lack, like that missing part of itself. But the drives in our bodies are not concerned with that. They're concerned with just their own repetitious forms of enjoyment, which derail us from ever getting what we want.
Got it. So,
well, I am going to have to go in a second now.
Yeah, same here. I got to drop off my friend at the airport. So,
Yeah, and I'm surprised you've all been able to do it as long as you have. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you all getting on here. And so basically what I'm hearing though is that we're all like interested in some similar projects, similar reasons in some ways, but then we all have a lot of like our own shit that we're working on at the same time. And so I just really look forward to seeing what you're all up to as you come out with it. I'm really stoked to get a chance to. I'll be out in nature. I'll be away from distractions. I'll get to read and write a lot more. So, and I think that that thinking has three components, right, Brian? I think you talked about this, like reading, writing, and talking, right?
Sorry, I missed whatever you just said. It was in
Oh,
and out.
the three components of thinking is reading, writing, talking. And a lot of people don't really do all three, and it's like, you can't do all three all the time at the same time because reading and writing both require a lot of focus. So anyway, I'm stoked that we're all up to a lot of really cool shit, and I look forward to whenever the hell we'll all get to talk again.
For
Sounds
sure, for
good.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
So,
Well, I'm about
cheers
to head
to that.
log off.
Yeah. All right. Well, y'all have a good rest of
Talk to
your
y'all
day.
later.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go to bed.
Yeah. Get some rest and see you in the morning.
Night, night, night.
I know.
Like, follow, subscribe.